This is Hunter Muse
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt. I, as our audience is probably well aware, am under Emily Moyer's tutelage right now, her nutrition tutelage.
Me too.
I have had a lifelong issue with food and with diet, and finding the right diet has been extremely difficult. And I got to a place where I lost about 80 pounds, and I was about 20 pounds away from reaching my initial goal. And then I started to backslide. I went on the keto diet and I did very well with that. And then it was not really sustainable. It seemed like, I started to integrate, and I wasn't doing cheat days or cheat meals or any of that, but I was integrating normal food, and I gained 10 pounds back. And then I started to flip the fuck out because I was like, I've done all this hard work. I do 2 hours at the gym. I'm doing really, really well, and I'm stuck. So I don't know how we started the dialogue with you, Emily, about food, but you said that you had a background in nutrition, and I immediately jumped on that because you're a very fit person, you're a high energy person, and I just thought this is who I just instinctively said, this is the person I need to talk to about food. She seems to know her shit. So, can you kind of tell us how you got into the nutrition world?
Yeah. So sure. I don't remember. I don't know where you got the idea to talk to me about it either, unless I had mentioned in like offhand that I did this, because it's really, for a while, it was something I was doing as like a main part of my whatever it is that I do. And then it kind of moved to the side at a certain point. And while I still take clients, it's not something that I like actively focus most of my attention on anymore. But somehow you figured out that I was doing it. And so I was honored to be asked to assist you. And then after that, Chris, on your journeys, I just want to just be really clear for everybody as we get started. I am a certified nutrition consultant. I am not a nutritionist. I am not a doctor. I am not a licensed medical professional. Everything I say is for entertainment purposes, and basically you can consider it to a certain degree like education, but the same way I go about all of the material I share with people, I'm doing it my way, right? That's just kind of
it's rooted. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm not adhering to any orthodoxy. I have broken most of the rules that even my most cherished mentors have given to me to follow, which is pretty much the way that I lead my life. Like I consume a lot of information. I experiment on myself first, and then I, offer that information to other people. And if they are interested, then I tinker and adjust and try to make something that I have learned from my journey have some way of applying to an experience they can have in theirs. And it's a learning process for both of us that way, because not everything that works for me works for someone else. Fortunately, like I like a mystery and I like solving it. And so I'm willing to tinker and try, and sometimes even go against some idea that I'm pretty set on to try and navigate, you know, someone else's metabolism or path or set of challenges or whatnot. And I've been doing this now for like kind of unofficially 8 years, but sort of officially 5 years.
Mhm.
The way I got into it was just I talked about my experience with my mentor and with changing my diet and lifestyle. And people started asking, well, I talked about that some. And then in the summer of 2017, I had like massive downloads when my mentor passed away. And I don't know if the downloads were coming from her or if just in that open state you're in when you're kind of vulnerable, when you're grieving, like my usual pain in the ass self was not doing whatever I normally do and something new could come in. And I downloaded all this information that I turned into a series that is very raw and very rough, but I've never gone back and redone it because I don't think I could actually do it better. It just captured the sort of moment on the idea of sugar as programmable matter. And from that point on, people were asking me for sessions. And I was like, sessions for what? Right? Like, I'm not, this is not something I do for my business. And people were like, well, maybe you should. So I went about trying to get a certification just so I could feel like I had some, I don't know why I felt like I had to do that. And I went to a holistic nutrition school, and I felt like what was being taught to me was, I already knew this was wrong. Like from the experiences I'd had with my mentor and then with my own body, I knew that I'd already tried all the things that they were recommending as being part of a healthy diet and lifestyle, and that they didn't work for me. And some of them felt like so backwards and wrong that I actually ended up dropping out of the program, and they were perplexed because I had like the highest score in the class, but I dropped out. And then I found actually the same program that my mentor had taken many, many years ago, which is a self-paced home study course that is done by the AANC. And they believe that it's a wide variety of people that are qualified to help somebody with their diet, and not everybody needs to have the same level of official education. So once you display a certain level of mastery through certain kinds of tests, then you're certified through that, right? So I did that, and then from there it's just been experimentation, evolution of my own diet, as well as the various kinds of people and streams that I receive information from, in terms of like what's going on in our environment and therefore inside of our bodies. And I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty set on what I think works. And I think the difference between what I'm working with now and all the other things I've done in the past, which also worked, like I was always able to help people as I built towards what I'm doing now. But with every other sort of eating program that I've ever subscribed to myself or taught to other people, it kind of like, it worked really well in the initial stages. And it was difficult to sustain long term. And then when you tried to return to it again after a period of taking a break or messy eating or trying something else or whatever, you could never really capture that same effect that you had the first time. Where I've evolved to and what I'm working with now seems to, it works a little bit differently every time. So I tend to revert to a very strict version of this eating program once or twice a year. And then I kind of build out, modify, maintain, and eventually, usually when I go on a vacation or something like that, end up getting messy and going back to square one. And every time I do, the direction I take it is slightly different, but it always starts from the same place. And I want to just address something you'd said, is that you'd said you had a lot of success on the keto diet. And actually, like on some level, the most success I ever had with my body in terms of getting it to the place that I think is ideal was also on the keto diet, right? Like I achieved at the age of 40, I guess, 43, maybe 43, the same body I had as a 16-year-old gymnast, and was able to maintain it for a little bit. And then injured my back, and then it became a disaster. Without like the highest level of intensity of workout and being able to maintain that really quickly, like that went away, and I could never get quite back to that place, and it became increasingly frustrating. It was like you try to do it more, you try to do it harder, you try a stricter, and you never are able to get back to that place that you're like, wow, this shit's amazing. I also have had very, very powerful results on the carnivore diet. In terms of with the carnivore diet, I never felt better than I felt. Like I'd say I felt better mentally, in terms of clarity, in terms of motivation, like sleeping well. Even though I never felt tired, I could still sleep. But that wasn't sustainable either if you're a person who at all enjoys eating. Right. And so occasionally I will still tinker with carnivore diet here and there. And a lot of what I do now is sort of centered around and heavily borrows from things I learned on the carnivore diet. But those are two very powerful diets that I also recommend everybody experiment with at some point in their life, just to see how many different ways your body can be. But in terms of having a tool you can always keep in your back pocket that like, hey, I've gotten a little off course. I need to get back on course, and I need to know that like something significant will happen in a reasonable period of time, and that like maintenance is relatively easy. And when I stray, coming home isn't like a super difficult challenge, right? So with those things in mind, like that's kind of where I'm at. I have learned a tremendous amount from a couple of mentors, and they are experts. I would not consider myself to be an expert. They know the ins and outs of all sorts of things and why things are happening and whatnot. And I kind of come at this the same way I come at everything else I do, like highly intuitive with it, willing to experiment, and also recognizing the kind of person I am, and something that may surprise people when they see how fit I am, how energetic I am, that I too have struggled with food. And not just that I like to be high performing and maybe I'm a little bit obsessive or OCD, though that's certainly true. But I tend towards indulgence, the same way you guys see me tell like ridiculous out there stories and expect people to be okay with that. Like I have ridiculous and out there desires when it comes to things I want to taste, things I want to eat, things I want to drink, things that I want to do with my body and whatnot. And, so like I've had to come up with sort of a way of being in the world regarding my exercise, regarding my food, and for me also like regarding how I indulge in alcohol, which I enjoy because I'm a cocktail mixologist. And while I'm never a person into like getting drunk or anything like that, I like cocktails, right? So how can I come up with a way of getting to fulfill my need for discipline and accomplishment, and also to allow myself to indulge in the things that I enjoy without stepping into an area that is dangerous for me, because I also know that area as a former drug abuser and having been addicted to meth. So this picture is complicated for me, and I've learned to help other people try to uncomplicate their picture.
Well, what's fascinating about it is that Freud says in his psychoanalysis that food issues are related to the mother. So a denial of eating like anorexia, these types of food issues are related to a denial of nurturing and denial of mother. And so then the opposite can be true for overindulgent. It's mommy issues. What I find so interesting about what you're doing is that you're not just dealing with the nutritional aspects of food. There is this really amazing intuitive component that you're talking about, and also a mental health component. So I think that the food itself is probably a lot smaller of an issue than understanding the psychology behind food and eating, and the nurturing nature of that, and someone's relationship with food. And what I've really enjoyed about working with you is that you see me as a whole person, and it's not just, okay, what are you eating? It's, how do you feel when you eat this? What's the relationship surrounding food? Do you feel like that's a natural, like an instinctual thing that you are able to apply because of your relationship with food and indulgence? Or is that something that you just picked up from being able to work with people?
So a couple of things, I think. So what you said about Freud was interesting. I don't know that I've heard exactly that before. And that makes a lot of sense. Like my mother left when I was really young. And like, when I say this, I don't mean it in an accusatory. My mom was somewhat neglectful, but not intentionally. Like, she always showed up. She paid her child support. We went to her on the weekends. She took us on nice vacations. We had all the guests and esprit clothes that we could want and all the fancy lunches, but emotionally she was not capable of providing the kind of nurturing that mothers generally provide their children. That came from my father, which is just a different dynamic. So, but one of the things that's kind of unusual considering all of that is I actually breastfed till I was 2. Right. And so then having her also then ripped away and not available for nurturing, as a young kid and as I got older, probably did set up some of the issues around food. I was also a competitive gymnast, certainly have plenty of experience with the eating disorders and all of that kind of stuff. I've been everywhere. I've done the anorexic thing. I've done the bulimic thing, the overeating, the undereating, overexercise, all kinds of stuff. But, I think, well, again, interesting what you said about the mother. Like, there was a lot of fancy lunches and indulgence and stuff like that with my mom, and then she wouldn't be there, right? And so I can see what you're saying there in terms of like the emotions about it. I think there's a couple of things. Like, I think I recognize that, like, at this point, any food addictions that I have, like, I was originally much a sugar addict, right? And then I'm pretty much not anymore. I can see myself every once in a while, like, if I get too sloppy, then I can start to feel the sugar monster being like, I can come back if you want. But I've pretty much slayed that beast mostly. But when I do emotional eating, because we all do, or when I'm feeling the drive for that, it does tend to be more of like a soothing or textural issue. It's kind of about feel, which is what you're talking about with like the mother and the nurturing. So like, I recognize that there's a certain kind of like the idea like of certain foods, like particularly carbohydrate type foods, like specific pizza crust or bread or baked goods, is not, oh, it's like sweet and it tastes good, although that's certainly true. It's like the mouthfeel, like when you kind of sink into it, that is probably not different than like pressing your head against your mother's chest or whatever it is. So I think that I recognize the relationship between like our feeling selves and our eating selves, on a level that translates over into making sure like I understand that I address how people feel when they either are eating something or when they're not eating something, in terms of like not just how they're feeling in their body, but how they're feeling in their life. But also I picked up pretty easily, and I didn't understand this quite in the beginning, but when I first started working with my mentor, right? She was very intuitive also. And she was very, very psychic, just naturally. And she would talk about things like being able to smell what was out of balance in her client's body, like as they approached her office and stuff like that, right? And that sounded like, wow, that sounded kind of crazy to me. But after I got off of drugs and the more sort of centered I got in my own body, particularly during that period of time, while I was grieving when she passed, when I got in really good shape on the keto diet and all this stuff, and I felt like an athlete again, I started to notice little feelings in my body when I would look at someone that was out of balance or unhealthy or whatnot. And I did start to be able to smell certain things on people or just feel in my body. It's weird. Like I can sit next to someone sometimes and like feel what food is causing their problem. If I don't know them, if they're not a client, like if they're sitting next to me in the movie theater or something and there's like something bothering me, like it'll occur to me like what thing they're eating that they think is good for them, but it really isn't. So I accepted from knowing her that was a valid way to obtain information. And I didn't go about trying to learn to do that. But when my body started to speak to me in a similar way, I didn't invalidate it. I just decided to like try it out for size and be like, this is going to sound crazy, but this is what I'm thinking. And then have them try that. And I also had like, I'm sometimes able to like if someone's just eating something, you can smell it on, and that's not what I'm talking about. But like I could precognitively smell on somebody's breath the food they really wanted to eat, but wasn't good for them or that they shouldn't. Like weird things like that. Like I just started to accept that as a valid form of feedback and of information and whatnot. And 9 times out of 10, it's right. And the unfortunate thing is also it usually makes me the bearer of bad news to somebody because I'm usually letting them know that like, there's some food that they really like, and it's often one that they thought was good. It's really hard to break someone's heart with something they thought that was good for them. Like when they know it's not, they're kind of expecting it.
Yeah.
Right. So I pay attention to all of my senses for information about what is going on with the other person. And this works whether I'm in physical connection with them or even sometimes through the computer, as most of my clients are remote clients because they come from the pool of listeners of the rest of my content. Yeah. So I think I just am open to, it's the same thing with everything else. If I had some fucking harebrained idea, I'm just going to say it and try it. And like 9 times out of 10, it's as good as finding something out any other way.
Go ahead.
Yeah. How did you, going into your mentor a little bit, how did you come across her? Were you looking for a mentor? Did she kind of come along at the same time that you were starting to get interested in nutrition? And also you alluded to it one time, and I understand if you don't want to go into it, but something about her passing, and there was some mysterious element to that. Oops. Speaking of which.
Okay. So it's funny because I'll go through phases where like none of this stuff comes up for like a couple of years, and then phases where it's coming up a lot. So I'm happy to talk about it. So my mentor's name was Anne Baroque, and anybody can Google her and take everything you see with a grain of salt, no matter which way you're perceiving it. But the last name Baroque is Boroch. And I was in a particularly challenging time in my life. Like I had fled my apartment in downtown Los Angeles, like I think really just barely missing out on ending up being Elisa Lam instead of her, right? Because basically like I feel like I escaped that perimeter with my life. And I was home in Los Angeles, at home at my dad's house, and having a really very rough time, like basically having bottomed out on drugs and all kinds of other stuff. And at this point, beginning to have health problems for the first time in my life, which is not something that I had ever experienced. And it was just from years and years of not taking good care of myself and using drugs and not having good sleep hygiene. And while I was always a reasonably healthy eater in like generally like when coming down from drugs or in the few days after having been on a drug binge, you're eating kind of crap. And then you have maybe weeks when you don't eat anything at all and whatnot. So I just couldn't get out of, like, I was constantly having sinus infections and all kinds of digestive issues and like weird things going on with my body. And I was listening to, there's a gentleman who used to call himself Mel Fabregas, but now he calls himself Mel Hostelrick. And there's something very strange going on there, but he has a radio program called Veritas, and he used to have a show called Sanitas, which was like his health show. And as one of the guests that he had on one time, he had her on, and I was just, this was when I was still up 36 hours a day, so I had plenty of time to listen to anything and everything. So I was listening to her talk about having healed herself of multiple sclerosis, which I did not think that I had, but having that she felt like multiple sclerosis and many other autoimmune diseases were sort of an end result of something that stemmed from candida overgrowth. And when she started to explain like how that played out for her as a young person, how it was related to multiple sclerosis, how she eventually healed the multiple sclerosis, and then how that relates to what she did with her clients, I recognized that I had all of the symptoms of candida overgrowth, not of multiple sclerosis, but of candida. And she talked a little bit about the kinds of the diet that she would do with people and what the experience was like to work with her. And then at the end of the show, she said that her office was in Studio City and I was living in the Valley at that time. And I was like, oh, like there was something about this person that instinctively I felt like I liked, and intuitively I felt like I knew her. Like I could imagine already like what she kind of looked like and what her office looked like, even though I hadn't seen her or been there. And so I decided, like, it sounded pretty hardcore and I didn't feel like I was there yet, but I decided that like when I felt like I was ready, I would call her. And about a month later, I decided I was ready. And so I called thinking we can get started. And she had like a huge waiting list. So I think I had to wait like a month or 6 weeks to get an appointment. But I did. And I went in, and when I walked into her office, like an energy flew through my body like I had never felt before. So I knew that like whatever this was going to be a different experience for me. And the first session was like an hour and a half. I worked with her as a client for only 4 sessions and regained my health during that period of time.
Wow.
But I will say that like in that hour and a half, if I hadn't liked her so much, like I liked her, I would have been disturbed at how psychic she was, because she seemed to have a level of knowledge and awareness of me where she knew things that I was intentionally keeping secret from everyone else in my life. So I knew there was like not really a lot of secrets and hiding that I was going to be able to go on with this. And so I had tremendous success with her diet. And over the course of working with her as a client, we became friendly. And for a period of time, I worked for her for a little bit. And then we were just friends. And then, during the period of time I was working with her, I had really largely stopped doing drugs, but I started doing drugs again to her. And I lied to her about it. And she caught me, and I wasn't wanting to fess up about it. And so she was like, goodbye. And that was the first time anybody had held me responsible for my behavior in a way that inspired significant change. I wasn't quite ready to make those changes yet, but over the course of the next like 6 months or a year, the level of guilt that I felt for having lied to her grew and grew and grew, and I became unable to enjoy doing drugs or getting high in any way anymore. Like I had already stopped really enjoying it. It was really more like I don't know what I was doing, because I was not a person on drugs like every day. I wasn't your typical addict. There was something that was not right for me that I was trying to dig out, or whatever it was. and the drugs served some purpose in that, but it became unbearable, the amount of guilt. And so eventually I got clean. I think about a year after I lied to her, I got clean. But it was really that pain of losing that friendship that started me thinking about things and started me just kind of down a different path. And so what I learned from her about food was amazing. It was really helpful. It helped me regain my health, and I've been a vibrant, healthy person since then. Like, even though I continued to use drugs for a year, the changes I made to the rest of my lifestyle, I was pretty healthy. And I actually think that getting off of sugar made getting off of drugs easier, because by the time I finally decided to quit, I did not have a hard time with it. And I think that having learned to break some of the food addictions, two things happened. I felt like I knew I could do it, but also it was weird. It was like once I lost the malaise of the sugar and all that kind of stuff, I could not hide from myself. I could not continue to lie to myself about what was really going on with the drug use, because a lot of other people in my life did not know. So I was kind of living that double life. And once sort of some of the veil had come down, it just became harder and harder to live with myself. And so I began in 2015 to really change my life, and she was a big part of that. But I had lost that friendship, and she had moved on away. She'd moved on and whatnot. And then like in the beginning of 2017, I had been talking about her on a show, and people were asking lots of questions. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to reach out to her and ask if she'll come on the show. I'll just see what she says. And so I reached out, and she called me back. I didn't even know if she would respond, because it had been rough. But she responded right away, and she's like, of course, I'll come on your show. She's like, but I'm actually back in Los Angeles, and can you come over like now or like tomorrow? And so I went. And the person that I found was a shell of herself. She had been through a very rough time. And I think I was able to really have apologized to her and explain what had been going on with me leading up to when I met her, during the period of time that I knew her, and things that had transpired since then, and was able to explain in a more coherent way some of the things that I've shared with all of you that have gone on in my life regarding my background that sound a lot different from a sober, reflective person than someone who's still in the chaos of all of that I had been when I initially knew her. And she was able to kind of hear it in a different way. But also what I heard from her didn't sound very different than what I was telling her, right? Like that some of the experiences she had been having over the course of the last few months before when it was that I was talking to her, made it clear. Like, it's not that I had never sort of suspected some of this before, but there was some hidden strings in her life and things that were going on that I think were beyond what she really wanted to acknowledge or sort of deal with on some level. And I don't blame her for that. So from that point, we were in communication again, but later that summer, she did pass away. And like, I don't like to really talk about this because her mother is still around, and I maintain a relationship with her mother, who I have tremendous love and respect for. I maybe have a different set of ideas about some of what may be going on than either any of the stories that you will read about her if you look this up, or what her mother thinks. But the official story is that she committed suicide, right? That she, publicly, it just says that she died of natural causes. But that's not what happened. I don't know if I should have said that on here. So
we can approach it on the other side of the paywall if you want to do that.
Yeah. So, right. So, and that's kind of the story, right?
Mhm.
It's sad, it's tragic. I don't rule out that what they say happened is really what happened. I'm not as 100% convinced of nefarious play as some people are,
Mhm.
but there's definitely some oddities, and it feels to me like if and when the time is right to dig into that in a more substantial way than I have, then I will do that. But for right now, it just feels like the right thing to do for now is to let it be. And it's been several years. She passed in 2017.
Mhm.
You know, and it was during that period of time when there were a lot of natural doctors passing away. I don't know if
Yep.
you remember the whole thing
Yes.
where,
Yes.
like, you know, they were saying that so and so committed suicide, but they were
Mhm.
found like with a rock on their back at the bottom of a lake, having shot 2 times in the back of their head. Like, it
Yeah.
didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was during that same period of time. And do you guys remember what the connective thread was between all those doctors?
I don't.
So the main connective thread is that these were people who were suggesting or recommending or working with something called GCMAF, which is a supplement that was challenging to get in the United States, that somehow acts on an enzyme that exists in the body that they're saying like was introduced through vaccines or other unnatural means, called the nagalase enzyme. And I've had several other shows where in various ways I've talked about the nagalase enzyme, and its correlation possibly to like the naga in different religious or spiritual texts.
Mhm.
And it's very weird, but like, this is, a lot of people feel this is correlated to autism and autoimmune diseases and all similar things that like her field of work was. Now, I never heard her speak of GCMAF or anything like that. She really dealt with diet and diet only.
Mm.
But she would have been, she was a very appealing personality, and she, like, if we were about to move into a period of time where the credentials of the mainstream health system would be questioned and people would be looking for new authorities as far as
Mhm.
health, and they'd have been looking to the natural health field for that, she was a very good candidate because she was very attractive and she had an ability, like, you know, I don't know if either of you guys did sports when you're little, but when you had like a coach you really liked, and so you worked harder for them, like you
Yeah.
wanted, like you loved the sport, but like I had gymnastics coaches, a few like this in my life. Like, I love gymnastics always, but it was easier with this coach because I not only wanted to do gymnastics well, but I wanted them to be impressed with me. I wanted them to feel proud of me. And she
Sure.
had that. Like, you wanted to work hard and you wanted to be disciplined and do all the things she asked for her. And when you let her down, the feeling was different than when you let someone else down. So she would have been, and she was very kind of no bullshit, right? Like, she definitely like had a high profile, like very early on. She'd been on the Montel Williams show and all that kind of stuff. But she wasn't ever willing to say something she disagreed with or didn't believe just to have a new business venture or to get a spot on this, that, or the other thing. So she probably would have been like a meaningful person in a movement towards personal responsibility about your health
Mhm.
and away from the traditional system. But there was a lot of other stuff going on too. So that's kind of what I can say about that right now.
Sure.
But she was a pivotal person for me in my life. She, the best thing a friend can do for you is hold you responsible for your behavior. And at a period of time in my life where my closest friends and family could not or would not do that for me, and I couldn't do it for myself, she did that. And it was painful, the loss of the friendship, but I might not have gotten clean otherwise.
Sure. Yeah. It's important to have somebody hold you to your word.
Yeah.
So what do you think happened to her in that period when you parted ways? And you said that she was a shell of a person when you reconnected. Was there some similar issues that she was maybe experiencing that you had had previously?
I'll just say I think there was someone sent to disrupt her life, and I think that person did a very good job of it. And that person was not me, right?
Wow.
But I recognized it. But this is what's weird, is that because of the state that I was in when I met her,
Mhm.
that outside of my field of awareness, I could have been sent to disrupt her life, right? And kind of thing. And so, I think that, as we all do, she had some tendencies and some holes in her life that hadn't been filled that she was looking to fill. And when that is true for you, then there's a soft spot, and somebody can come in and play on that soft spot. And I think that happened. And whether that happened in the standard way that happens in the world, which is there's not like a whole conspiracy behind it, but somebody just takes advantage of you, that's certainly possible.
Mm.
In this particular case, there could have been other motivations behind that, in my opinion. I don't know that to be true or not. And so she had, had her heart trampled on by someone, and had a hard time moving past that because she had moved away from a lot of her stability and comfort zone, during that period of time. And just, it seemed like her reality had been pulled out from under her, and she just couldn't find her footing again. Like, she was a person who needed everything to be just so, right? Like, she, it was very easy to upset her nervous system, her self-confidence, her, like, all of that kind of stuff. And so she had a lot of things she did to keep everything in its place. And then when she moved away from that in maybe like a period of like excitement, when the excitement wore over, there was nothing underneath her feet, and she just kind of collapsed, and had a hard time picking herself back up, and ended up moving back to Los Angeles and start to put things back together, and finished her book. Like, she had self-published books for many years, but then she had a big book deal with HarperCollins, and she did finish that, and that book did come out, and she was starting to put things back together when she passed, and there had been a period a few months before that seemed worse, and so it was a little surprising when things happened. There's a lot of unanswered questions still, in my opinion. And also, I'm very, very cautious not to let my perception of the world run wild in terms of figuring out what happened for another person, because she's her own person with her own story. But I also, I can't pretend not to see things that I see. So I have to be careful about where I put all this in my mind. But I have much love for her. She really helped me. And I am the person that I am in a lot of ways because I know the damage that lying does. And it was so easy for me to lie at that moment. And I will put myself now in tremendously uncomfortable situations rather than lie. And so it was a big change in my behavior and my ability to hold myself responsible.
What's so interesting about this, Emily, that is resonating so deeply with me is that in my journey with you, I have, as you know, and now our listeners will know, I've gone off of the plantation a couple of times, as you coined this term so beautifully, in terms of the diet. And I have felt the exact same thing. what I felt, and I don't know if that's just the energy that you resonate with, and so that's the energy that you draw to you. But I felt like actually said to Chris, if this is going to work, I have to be completely honest. I cannot lie to her. I cannot tell her something that isn't true. So I have to be forthcoming, as painful as it may be. And I said to him the other day, I said, he goes, Emily's just a person. Like, what do you think is going to happen? I said, I just don't want her to break up with me. I just do not want her to break up.
She thinks that you're gonna fire her.
Yeah, I was like, if I tell her the truth, then I'm afraid she's going to be like, well, you're fucking far gone and you're never going to get fixed and it's never going to be better. Like, you're on your own. And I'm so devoted to our relationship and how how much respect I have for you, that I don't want to fuck it up. So when I go off the plantation, I know that I have to share that with you, that I can't be like, oh, well, I'm not going to tell her and live a lie. I just can't live a lie with you.
Well, she's been there. She knows you, obviously, especially by the stories that you're telling us, that you know what that's like.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very like the amount of distorted behavior that people get into around food, I think maybe is like only matched by the distorted behavior they get into around their possessions. If you're like a hoarder, right? Like the guy, someone like the crazy logic. And even people who seem to have like 100% normal, healthy relationship with food, like good weight, exercise well, and whatever, because of the fact how food is used in our society as like, we need it for sustenance to live, but it's also part of like celebrations, and it's also part of like rewarding people or punishing people or all that kind of stuff. Like it's probably the most complicated issue for everybody, right? And so like there's nothing, I know that sometimes you feel like, wow, I'm having to admit this like incredibly what seems to you like extreme behavior or whatever, but I've heard all kinds of stuff that people do, and I've done all kinds of weird stuff myself, and I'm still not perfect, right? Like I can come up with like one hell of a rationale for like why it's okay that I do this, that, or the other thing or whatnot. But it's really just like, it's for you, right? Like it really only actually matters if you're honest with yourself, right? And if I had like, if you're being honest with yourself, you don't have to lie to somebody else, right? Like, I mean, I know people always bring up like, oh, well, like if your grandmother asks if her lipstick looks nice and it doesn't, should you, like, come on, people, like these are like inconsequential things, right? But like, if I felt good about myself, I wouldn't have lied to Anne. I either would have owned the fact that I'd done drugs, or I'd have lied to her and not cared that I had lied, and everything would have gone on in life, So, pretty much if you're lying to someone else, you're only lying to yourself, and you don't always have to tell everyone everything. But if you're having a hard time accepting for yourself what you've done, sometimes telling another person can unburden you in a way that allows you to like step back up to the plate, and also like temporarily ask someone else, hey, can you help me be accountable? Like I'll be able to be accountable for myself again at some point in the future, but like right now I'm having a hard time. So when you sort of do that, it allows someone in for a little bit, and then at a certain point you'll be able to have your mistake and not feel like you have to tell me or even Chris or whatever. You'll just be like, you know what? I know what I did. No one else really needs to know. Like I matter the most. And so I'm going to stop doing it for me.
Well,
right?
it's fear of loss of love.
Yeah.
And fear of rejection. So that's where jealousy comes from. That's where any kind of lying comes from. It's because we're afraid that something that we value is going to be taken away.
Or fear of being judged.
And so, well, and even in the judgment, I think that's where the fear of someone pulling back comes in. It's like, I don't want you not to respect me. I feel such a tremendous amount of respect for you. I want you to respect me. And so the first time I went off the plantation and I told you, and you were
Just so
like,
everybody knows, like, I'm not a slave owner. The hunter is not my slave, right? I just have found that, like, like it's a good metaphor for certain aspects
yes.
of the diet. But yes, Hunter is not my slave. She's not speaking so glowingly of me because she's afraid that I might whip her if she doesn't, right? So
I told you, what I told you when we had our next consultation, I told you, you were like, wow, when you go off, you go way off. Like you you don't fuck around. Like
I
you're
can respect that. Like, I can respect that, right? Like, I don't like. What's the point of like breaking your sobriety with one line? Like, if you're gonna fucking do it, like, have a goddamn party, right? So,
exactly.
so I get that. You know what I mean? And it's also like it's it's pretty common amongst perfectionists, right? Like, I was a gymnast, which I can't think of anything that attracts more obsessive, OCD, perfectionist type of people. And amongst that group is that most, like, I remember having a conversation like on the floor at the gym one day when I was coaching at a gym in Tucson. And it was the gym that the Carrie Strug was originally from before she had gone off to train with Bella Caroli. But her parents live in Tucson, so when she would be in Tucson, she'd train there. And this was just after the year after the Olympics, where she'd hurt her ankle but done the vault anyway, and they won the gold medal. And I remember sitting with her on the floor, we were stretching and chatting, and what she was just there working out a little bit, and I don't know what I was doing. We were chatting, and here's somebody who's like was the hero of the summer before and all of this kind of stuff, and like she's sitting there telling me about like all this angst that she had been going through all day to decide if she was going to drive through McDonald's and get the fries or not get the fries, and if she ate the fries, what she was going to have to do for making right kind of thing. Like, it was like a crazy conversation about French fries.
Yes.
And it's like you'd already won the gold medal, right? You know what I mean? But so I've seen I've been around very distorted behavior around food for most of my life. And like I had this one coach who, when she told me like what her binges consisted of, I was like, she would like buy out 7-Eleven. Like she would like, like completely clean the shelves at one 7-Eleven and then drive to another one and
Holy
like
shit.
empty the garbage from her car from the previous
Wow.
7-Eleven in the garbage can of the next one she was going to. And I was just like, oh my God. Yeah.
Holy
So
shit.
like, but yeah, I could respect the going for it, dude. I don't know.
Wow. So with Anne's tutelage, what was her level of training? Like where has she received her information?
So she was an old school naturopath. Like, there used to be multiple pathways to that title, and now there's not. Like, that's been part of the clampdown on natural health.
Yeah.
Is like the way that she was like inducted into that reality got taken away mid-career for her. So she actually was just, by the time she became really well known, she was a CNC, which is what I am, and I went to the same program she did. So while she had learned quite a bit in the initial program that she became a naturopath through, a lot of her information was self-study because she was trying to solve her own problem. And then also, like, she was a very intuitive person, and she consulted with a lot of medical intuitives, and a good portion of her healing was passed down through metaphysical information, sort of spiritual, psychic information. They would give her a clue, and then she would go study and research, and she would figure it out. And she put together a diet for herself based around some of these ideas that had been gifted to her from other planes, let's say.
Wow.
And not that different than the way the sugar thing came to me.
Mhm.
But she would go research and she would experiment with her own body. And she kind of had figured out at a certain point what worked. And she when she was like in her early 20s, had a lot of problems with like Epstein-Barr virus and mononucleosis, and was able to use this diet to overcome that. And she got better for a couple of years. And so she just went right back to eating the way she had before, because she thought she had healed herself. And then at a certain point, things flared up again. And then she like had a sudden kind of onset of multiple sclerosis, and it advanced pretty quickly. So she returned to the diet that she had used to heal herself before, and it worked again. But she understood now that this was something she pretty much had to continue. Now, as like the years went on, she became slightly more flexible, but she was pretty committed to the way of eating that she taught to her clients. I would say that she was the most adherent person I've ever met. Like, I know lots of nutrition coaches, dietitians, nutritionists, all that kind of stuff. And there's some of them say one thing and do completely another thing. Most of them are cyclical with their relationship to it. Like, they may have been gung-ho the first like 5 or 10 years they were working in that area. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to be here for a whole lifetime. I am going to experiment with other things. But I think most of them, whatever they subscribe to, they keep somewhere between like a 70-30 and a 90-10 balance in terms of like being on it or being off it. She was pretty much always on it. Like, a splurge for her was a lot different than a splurge for me or a splurge for someone else and whatnot. So she really believed in it on every level of her being. And then also she'd had enough health ramifications that the consequences for her, if things reverse, were higher than what they ever were for me or for a lot of other people. But her big thing was really, there was a lot of ins and outs and specifics to the diet she taught. And if people are interested in her work, her book is called The Candida Cure, I think is what it's called. I'm pretty sure it's called. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I'm pretty sure that that's the name of her book. Wait, the Candida, is that it? Let me just make sure that I'm not telling. The Candida Cure. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the kids. That's right. The Candida Cure, and it's by her name, Amber Oak. She also has a book called Healing Multiple Sclerosis. But basically, the main principles of her diet are put down in both of those books. And it sort of centers around the removal of gluten, dairy, and sugar from the diet. And then within that, some further sets of restrictions and rules. But it's a more it's a wider variety of foods eaten on a day-to-day basis than what I work with now. And it is also much like, it's still leaning much more towards getting the vast amount of your diet from like vegetables and things like that, as opposed to from fat and protein. It's kind of more vegetables and then some grain, some meat and protein, and some fruit or whatever. But the main things being avoiding gluten, dairy, and sugar, and not eating fermented foods, certain kinds of supplementation, and sort of once you kind of healed all your health problems, then maintaining that like on about a 90-10 basis.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of success with it. I did have a lot of success with it, but even while I was working with her, I felt the desire to eat more meat and fat than that diet was. Like, I would follow all the rules in terms of the foods you could and couldn't eat, but I tended to eat more meat than I was supposed to be allotted and more fat. I didn't eat the sugar or the dairy or the gluten or anything like that. But I always struggled with the percentages on that. I think maybe it's partly because I was much more athletic and active on some level than a
Mm.
lot of other people. I was not sick. A lot of people who come to her were, I was not well when I first came, but once I regained my health, I was not a person that struggled with autoimmune issues or anything like that. And I had a very quick recovery and much faster than a lot of her other, kind of clients. So, but I met people when I was working with her and then at her funeral, who had gone to her in a wheelchair and now run marathons and are adherent to that diet and that way of life. And it works really well for a lot of people. The other thing, and I think this is like, I don't really know what she would think about what I'm doing now with diet. I don't know if she would have evolved to something more like that, or if she would have just disagreed with me. But, you know, she wouldn't have been able to disagree that I was healthy. So she just would have been like, well, it works for you, but it wouldn't work for other people. I think that something has significantly changed because a lot of the foods that I was eating when I was on her eating plan worked well for me then, but do not work well for me now. And I think that in that period of time, it's been about 10 years since I met her. I think we're living in a completely different kind of electrified environment. Like, it was building towards this.
Right.
But I think that just like we have started to do more things to protect ourselves from what's going on in the atmosphere and in the environment, so do all the other living things. And I think a lot of plant life has started to generate additional lectins, like additional sort of like coatings, like, you know, sort of exoskeleton type of things. And I think there's also, I think plants are conscious, and I don't know that they love that everyone's on a vegan diet. Like, I don't think they want to be eaten either. I think that, you know, if you listen to certain people who teach the carnivore diet, they're like, look, there's a battle between the plant and the animal kingdom, and the plants are generating toxins inside and you know, all kinds of weird oxalates and things in a way that they weren't always, because they're trying to fight this out. I don't know if that's true. It resonates for me on some level, but I don't think that all the plants and vegetables and even some of the grains and things like that are the same. We know they're not the same that they were 50 or 100 years ago, but I'm not sure they're even the same as they were 10 years ago. Foods that I used to eat no problem 10 years ago, like now I have a really hard time with.
It could also be the ramping up of chemtrailing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And
Metal particles.
the water is not as clean as it was 200 years
Everything.
ago.
If there's metal everywhere and then our
Definitely.
environment is electrified,
Yeah.
they're just like we wear devices or have things in our home or drink special things to sort of ward that off. The way that they cope with those problems are a little bit different, but they're doing it nonetheless. And so I think some foods that I would be interesting if she were still around to know if she evolved on this at all or not. You know, I have a lot of respect for people who I have like one other mentor that I want to mention, and he came along a lot later, but I've learned a lot from a lot of the people who are like into animal-based nutrition and carnivore diet. I've listened to a lot of them, but the person that I've probably learned the most from and also rely and lean on and make my own tweaks to is a gentleman named Rob Stewart, who I've had on my show a couple of times. He's a skin health coach, basically, but he became very, very famous in the vegan influencer world and then moved to the carnivore diet, because even though he had healed his skin with the vegan diet, he like basically lost the rest of his health. So had to basically come out and say, like, you know, like I made a lot of money and became very successful doing this, and now I do something else and whatnot. And he's never afraid to change his mind or his opinion publicly. And he's constantly evolving, constantly cycling his diet. And I've learned a lot from him. He's also been a good friend to me, and we chat and whatnot. And in terms of like helping, like having a 100% success rate at helping people clear their skin, like he's definitely the guy, and the amount of correlation between gut health and skin health is 100%. So I've learned a lot from him as well. He evolves his opinion a lot, and it would be interesting to know if she would have evolved as well. But I don't get to know.
Hi.
Hi. Fancy meeting you here. Come here often.
Only when you're here. I actually got emotional towards the end of our dialogue with Emily. I just really appreciate. I've had such a tumultuous relationship with food my whole life that finding someone who is a font of knowledge when it comes to nutrition and just helping me navigate in an extremely non-judgmental way.
Absolutely.
So anyone who's interested in, you know, tackling psychic issues that you've had surrounding food and psychological issues, Emily is the person to do it. And she will give you advice and she won't judge you regardless of where you are in the process. So I cannot recommend her enough.
I second that emotion. Very non-dogmatic and
Yeah.
very intuitive.
Yeah.
I love the way that she handles the dynamic of all this because it could be extremely dogmatic and like setting these strict boundaries where if you venture outside of them, great time for my voice to do this, by the way. If you venture outside of them, you've sinned, and if you stay inside, you're a saint. And it's not that clear cut thing. Life isn't like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of play. And if you just can get over the initial, I don't know, maybe shock of having to eat these certain things for a little while, then it gradually expands, and it gradually expands organically in a way that is um, is central to you yourself. There's no no diet. That's these fads and diets that come out that, you know, propose that you'll lose weight and it's the same thing for everybody. It doesn't work that way. Everybody has a different ecosystem. So I'm going to get some water while you.
Yeah. Everyone does have a different ecosystem. And I do think that there are psyops attached to diet programs and that there are nefarious players in the dietary world that are associated with pharmaceutical companies and associated with big medical and I've seen a lot of that over the course of my life. I've seen people that I love and care about get sucked up into these diets and try these things. And then, they have compromised immunity. So then they have to go on pharmaceuticals and it becomes this vicious cycle and circle. And I think that these things have been going on. We can always go back to the Rockefellers and their attack on natural medicine, and I think that, all of these tentacles of this octopus puss are working together to keep people, trapped and enslaved, and this could be another system like that. But what's so beautiful about Emily is that she's giving you the autonomy and the personal ownership and responsibility over your health by giving you specific tools that you then navigate and then you then try. And I think there's something very powerful about that. It's not this militant thing, as you were saying, like you have to be like this and do this and only eat this. It's like, all right, well, let's peel the layers back and get you down to kind of baseline of eating these very basic foods and then add to that. And but you are with yourself every single day. So you are the person who is actually doing the experimenting. You know what works and what doesn't work. And the big key here is being honest. It's being honest with yourself and what your body's feeling and not trying to, find ways to be slippery, cuz I think that's easy to do.
And unlike the medical industrial complex, Emily is not trying to create lifelong customers. Basically, she is training you how to do this yourself. So
Yeah,
after you've gone through this routine and learn the dynamics and what your relationship to all this is, because everybody is different. Even Hunter and I have way different ways that we are navigating
totally.
our dances that we're doing with our body.
Mhm.
Um, then you can do it yourself. And so that's the part of the learning process as we're learning how to regulate this, and it as she mentioned, it involves honesty with yourself. Because it's really super simple, I know from firsthand experience, to justify just about any kind of bad habit, particularly when it comes to food, particularly if you're a hardcore recovering sugar addict like I am. So
Yeah.
it's I've quit many things in my life. None of them were as hard. I think crack would be easier than sugar for myself. Perhaps that's not the case for everybody, but so that's my main issue. Some it will be weight, some who knows, eating disorders, whatever. But this is like not a one size fit all, but a one dynamic fits all. And the way that you work with that dynamic is very personal and centric to you and what your needs are. And I'm loving it so far. It took me a while to be able to truly say that, but I can say it now.
That's true. Well, I had a friend years ago who I was saying something about sugar being harder to kick than heroin, and he was a former heroin addict, and he's like, "How can you say that? You know, heroin, I needed heroin to live." And I was like, "Well, you actually need food to live. You were addicted to heroin, which made you feel like you need heroin to live, but you really don't. Like, you don't really need alcohol to live. You don't need crack or cocaine or meth or weed to live. When you're addicted to those things, you feel like that's your life force and your life energy. But the reality is that nutrition is the basis of our lives. And I think that there's so many nutritionally depleted foods that people eat, and I see it all the time, especially at university, that people are eating, bags of Cheetos, or they're eating, Oreos, or drinking Mountain Dew, or just shit food, and none of it has any nutritional value. And then you see the energy plummet and the mood plummet, and I just want to say, well, you haven't eaten anything. You've put something inside your body, but you've eaten no nutrition. So your body is probably going, "Well, I did the motion of eating, like I chewed and you put something in my gut, but the value of that is so minimal that nothing really seems to have happened." So I think that that's one thing that I really appreciate, is that everything that she is recommending as your baseline is nutritionally dense food. And so you'll notice the difference when you eat these things for a few weeks. It's like, wow, I feel great. Like, I can think, I have energy. Like, it shifted so much in my uh daily life, and just kind of how I was navigating things. Yes, there was boredom, but it was more, um, I think it was more of us just being able to commiserate. Like, we were kind of like in the same on the same level as far as what we were being tasked to eat at that point. But we've gone beyond that point. We've been on this diet for 4 months now, 5 months.
I
So
was thinking 3 or 4, but
I've been on since February,
Mhm.
and I think you came in like a month after
Yeah.
I did. February, March, April, May, June, July. Yeah, 5 months.
Wow.
So,
Holy shit.
yeah. So I've been doing this for a while, and the mapping of your mood and your behavior and how you're feeling, and all of these other things, it's interesting to observe that and see the shifts happen. So I'm really, really grateful for Emily, and I'm so happy that she was here tonight and willing to talk to us about it, because she does charge a premium for her services, and she was very gracious and open and willing to talk about what she does, and just give us some clues of how you can move forward with her plan. And I really hope you guys take advantage of that, because
Yes.
you will be very happy that you did. It's totally worth it.
My turn. So thanks. God, I love that look. Like, dude, what are you even saying?
No.
So I would take advantage of what she's proposing with the group sessions. I think that would be great. there's nothing I think differently that we could have not gotten in a group session that we could have in
Yeah.
an individual session.
Yep.
So I would take advantage of that. If you're a Patreon member, even better. If you're a Patreon member of both of us, even better. So make sure and get that email off as soon as you possibly can, just so she'll kind of know what number she's working with. And perhaps if it's a success or she gets enough people, then she'll do this again and we can make it a regular thing. Maybe
Yeah.
we can even turn it into some sort of a Patreon event or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we both highly recommend her, not only because of what we talked about tonight, but because she's an excellent person and
Yeah.
such a such a mind-bending power of
Yeah.
being able to assimilate, uh, extract, collate, and read, articulate many different aspects of many different dimensions of our existence, and has a way of connecting the dots and putting things together that just blows my mind. I likened her to Terrence McKenna when we first had her on the melt, and she's just a great puzzle worker. And
She
it's
is.
I could just listen to her babble for hours. I actually have listened to
Yeah.
her babble for
I have
hours.
too. I just love it.
Yes.
I do want to say that where did my thought go? It was right there on the tip of my tongue. Emily, what were we talking about? Her. Geez, it was
The
good
group
too.
sessions.
Group sessions. Fuck, I hate when that happens, and it's so rare that it happens
know.
where something just slips away into the ether.
You think on that, and I'll start doing the closing things.
Okay.
If you would like to get a hold of us for whatever reason, suggesting guests, recipes that we can actually eat with our, unless it's on a cheat day, meal, I mean, um, you can reach us at the Melt podcast at protonmail.com or hunter muse, keep on thinking, at protonmail.com. Did you come up with it yet? No.
Oh, yes, I
good.
did. I got
Woohoo.
it. Yeah, so a lot of our audience, I think, are like-minded people that they really, question
Open-minded.
consensus reality, question the system. If you want to fuck the system over, you really want to fuck this system over, then get healthy, because that is the number one thing you can do, is get off of meds, get out of the medical industrial complex, get your body into its most highest frequency form that you possibly can. And the way to do that, from my perspective, is your diet. It's what you're eating. That is what's informing all of these other things. So
Oh my gosh. Keep talking. It's still recording.
that's the magic. The magic is how you're fueling your body and what you are doing to fuel your body.
And many of the roads that a lot of the conversations that we have on the melt lead back to, if you want to change the world, you've got to change yourself.
Yep.
And if you're walking around in a haze and a fog and you're grumpy and you're moody and you're just swinging back and forth and you feel like you're at the mercy of something that you can't put your finger on or pinpoint, there's a good chance that it's what you're putting into your body, just like the music that you put into your ears, or the TV shows or cinema that you put into your eyes. Everything, all of it matters. So if your fuel is fucked up, then your machine is going to be fucked up, and your machine is your interface between your spirit and the 3D world. So it's good to have clear channels. It's good to be lucid. It's good to know where you stand, simply put. So yeah, if you want to change the world, change yourself. If you want to change yourself, then diet is a good place to start.
Yeah, because it does inform your mindset and how much energy you have.
Definitely.
And it's very empowering. And that's the thing that I think we can kind of the golden clasp we can put on all of this is that what Emily is doing and the method she's using is about empowering you into your decision making process of how you eat and what you eat. So
Yes,
that's what we're here to testify and
absolutely.
give her that testimonial. She's got it.
All right. We need to go before our kids have to go to bed
Yeah,
and hang out with them for a few minutes. So
that's right.
we love you all.
We
And
do deeply,
yes,
truly.
hope you enjoyed it, and
Yep.
tons of great stuff coming. Stick around. Ta-ta.
Meow.